welcome to Dispel Magic, the podcast where we overthink how the magic of D&D might shape your campaign in surprising and unexpected ways. I'm Benjamin, game designer and writer. You can find me on Twitter at SterlingVermin or the internet at large at sterlingvermin.com.
Hello, my name is Dane, and I'm a Dungeon Master podcaster and voice actor. I'm in danger everywhere, online, at Dane in Danger. Benjamin, I checked out some books from the library. I thought you might find them interesting. Would you like to hear about the books I checked out?
Sure, looks like one of them is covered in angel wings and the other one is made of human skin. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what drew my eye to them.
Yeah, well, they're eye-catching, that's for sure.
Is it a good idea that I keep them in the same place right next to each other?
Bizarrely, there's actually no indication that that's a problem at all. So I think you can keep those two as a set, box set.
Good to know.
Get a slipcover for those things. You're good to go.
Everyone, it's an item episode on Dispel Magic. We're doing essentially 2 items.
It's a double whammy.
Ba-ba-bam.
The Book of Exalted Deeds and the Book of Vile Darkness.
Interesting. I have never heard of these items.
If people who were around in about 20 years ago for D&D will remember that there were 2 books towards the end of D&D 3.x's life cycle that shared these names. One was the Book of Vile Darkness and the other one was the Book of Exalted Deeds. Mm-hmm. I think they were pretty awful books, but I thought most of that game was pretty awful, so I didn't play a whole lot of it or read those books. But the gist of it is that the Book of Exalted Deeds is all good stuff. It is goodness in a book.
Is that
and the
what
Book
it
of Vile
is?
Darkness is evil and evil in a book. It's just like pure manifested evil.
Huh. So, it seems pretty straightforward then, huh? You read from the good one, good stuff happens. Read from the bad one, bad stuff happens.
That's not totally inaccurate. I would say they're more like, I guess, recruitment tools for one side or the other. It's almost like they're
propaganda.
Opposing sides in a sort of mystic, esoteric, cosmological war, and both of these books are sort of drafting people into that eternal duality or fight.
Sure. Plot hook the item. Got it.
That's right. We ended up making good, evil, and holy magic a bit of a theme recently, so I decided it was the perfect time to kind of drop in on these magic items and see what they're all about. So let's get to it. Unlike a lot of other episodes, we're not going to give you all of the detailed information about these magic items right up front because it's separated over the course of like 4 or 5 pages in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Oh my God.
And you would never remember the start of it by the time we got to the end of it anyway. And so we're just going to start talking about discrete sections, and we'll tell you about what's what as we get to it.
Pertinent information as it comes up. So these books are actually found separate from the other magic items because they're artifacts, which the DMG explains are more like plot devices than magic items that you can just drop in a game.
One thing that really struck me when I was doing the research on this is that when I realized, because I went looking for these books first in the magic item section, when I realized they're in the artifact section, I was like, oh, maybe these are cooler than I remember them being. But then I read them and they're actually very bad. They're not like no one would ever care about having one of these things all that much. And they're pretty uninteresting, which obviously made it perfect fodder for this podcast.
Right. Yeah, we'll really take them to their limit.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what makes them so profoundly bad?
Sure. Well, the benefits of the Book of Exalted Deeds are that your wisdom increases by 2. You cast light because you have a halo, and that gives you a few other utility benefits. If you're a cleric or paladin, your spell slots count as 1 level higher. That's nice.
And that's it. Those are the benefits. So if you want to be a little more wise, constantly cast light, and your spells are stronger if you're one of 2 classes, then this is the book for you. And if none of that stuff matters, then you have no interest in the Book of Exalted Deeds.
Does it say there's a limit of 1? Can I have a stack of halos and
Artifacts are explicitly like there's a singular version of it in the multiverse. So I don't. Maybe you could
oh,
stack halos from some other thing, but you're never going to be able to get multiple books of Exalted Deeds that will let you do that.
that's too bad. It'd be cooler if it did. Um,
Yeah, so really in this, I mean, we'll talk I think a little bit more about it later, but the only benefit that's even slightly interesting for world building here is that last one about pumping up the spell slots of clerics, because that'll let clerics cast higher level spells more frequently, and usually those higher level spells are really world altering. So
I mean, that does sound like a powerful item, but like a powerful item, like a wondrous item, maybe, but not, as you've said, an artifact that is singular.
right. But so tell us about the Book of Vile Darkness.
Yeah, the benefits of the Book of Vile Darkness are you increase an ability score of your choice by 2 and decrease a different ability score by 2. So kind of a give and take. You become disfigured in a way evil things like, which, side note, is pretty problematic to associate disfigurement with evil. That's rough. That's a rough
Yeah,
one.
I was my mouth hung open when I read that.
This is writing from another time. You can command evil creatures, which is this magic's item's only decent benefit, according to Benjamin. You know things about evil. Like, oh, is that an evil thing?
I'm
About that.
I'm simplifying it, but it's basically like if you need to make a roll to see if you know about something evil, you get to add twice your proficiency bonus. That's
Wow.
what that does.
Yeah. It's a knowledge check, which
Yeah.
we all know. Just D&D's rife with knowledge checks. And you can speak in a way that's so evil that it hurts you and non-evil creatures around you. What?
Yeah, it's
Wait, what?
it's all like here's some good stuff, or here's some like very small good stuff, but it's all paired with really bad stuff too. Except for that commanding evil creatures thing. That's I guess
I know
that's
there's
good.
a certain class of player who loves to just really, have the two sides of a item. They're like,
I don't mind an interesting item that's got drawbacks, but when it's things like one ability score gets higher and one gets lower, it's like, well, that's about as boring as it could possibly be, right?
your charisma is suddenly down. Oh no. Oh
Yeah.
no. You get
So
weaker.
anyway, I mentioned earlier, none of these is particularly world changing. It's not when we'll get into sort of the impact on a setting or how these things might be exciting to incorporate into a game later, but they won't be exciting because of anything these items do as a benefit, because that's not that good. In addition to all those things, artifacts have this weird extra quality where they might have random extra benefits or drawbacks. And so every time the Book of Exalted Deeds shows up in your setting, it's going to have a couple random extra benefits. And when the Book of Vile Darkness shows up, there's going to be a few extra random benefits and then a few extra random drawbacks. Because I guess evil is just the difference between good and evil is just that evil has drawbacks.
Good is just good.
Yeah. Mechanical standpoint, I don't see any reason why any character would ever pursue having one of these things. They're not that good to have.
This feels like a mid-level boss, like a level 7, level 8. You come up with somebody who has one of these things,
Right.
just
Yeah.
and you defeat them, and then the DM's like, and now you have this, and everyone's like, okay, cool. We'll just keep it in a box.
It would be more interesting if these were like a smaller magic item that could be like proliferated, and so like you wanted to find and contain these things instead of there's just one that exists and it doesn't really do much, but it's like it's so evil, like, but not an evil in a way that matters at all. Just like we're just all supposed to be scared that it's evil or good.
It's like the person who tells about how great they are and without actually doing any of those things, just constantly talking about it.
So even though it's not useful to an individual person, I did try to think about whether or not these would have utility in institutions. And I do think there's more, you can make more of a case that these are useful for organizations or institutions than they are for a person.
That makes sense. Yeah, just share it around a little bit. The local abbey has the good book to help booster healing in extreme cases or something like that.
Yeah,
It can get passed around.
Well, I mean, yeah, less like that and more like this. What you read earlier were the benefits of being attuned to the book. There are also there's also qualities that both of these books have that apply to people who just for the first time attuning to it, or people who are trying to read it.
Yeah, the Book of Exalted Deeds has a property that when evil creatures attempt to read it, they take 24d6 radiant damage that ignores resistances and immunities. Creatures reduced to 0 hit points by this damage disappear in a blinding flash of light, destroyed but leaving behind their possessions. Bum bum bum.
Yeah. So,
ooh, tricked ya. Ooh, you're gone. Ooh.
Yeah.
You thought it was something, but it's something else.
Shouldn't have read the book.
Shouldn't have read that book.
We talked in a previous episode, I think the episode just prior to this one, Detect Evil and Good, about the possibility of parole boards using that spell to determine if a creature had been rehabilitated. With the Book of Exalted Deeds, you could just build this supermassive prison and put the Book of Exalted Deeds in the middle, and then any inmate who can walk up and read the book is free to go because they've been rehabilitated, because they didn't get incinerated by trying to read it. Because it doesn't even say when an evil creature reads the book. It says when an evil creature attempts to read it.
Yeah.
So you don't get to
open up the front cover, just kind of skim. Oh, there I go.
Yeah. As soon as you're, I guess you're through like less than one word, you just incinerate if you're evil.
I think attempting to read something is opening it up.
I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It's a very weird, I mean, like
reaching for the cover.
Looking at it with the intention to read it. Like, what if the book's already open? Then it's just like looking in its direction and thinking you might.
Yeah. Thought crime.
Yeah. So that's one thing. I do think that you could even expand it to the idea of there being a whole judicial system where people aren't judged on individual crimes. Like, if I steal an apple from you, that might be a problem. People might not like it, but it's not a crime unless I go read the book and I get destroyed. So basically, you're judged by the kind of summary of all of your actions instead of just one. So like maybe when I steal from you, I don't get any kind of punishment, but I do have to go read from the Book of Exalted Deeds.
Oh my God.
And
if you've gotten bad enough, you're gone.
Exactly. If I manage to stay good despite my actions, well, then I'm still good enough to participate in society and be there. But the second I do something that pushes me into evil, then I'm just gone.
Horrific. That's horrific and arbitrary. And like, is the book connected to any one god? Like, whose morality is judging this book?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into that later. But yeah, I mean, you're right that I don't know. In some ways, it's less arbitrary than our kind of fallible justice systems, in that, like, presumably this is like, you can't fake this, like you're evil or you're not. And so like, if you're evil, then, but it also, I think, in the real
life,
world,
evil doesn't exist. Like evil and good doesn't exist. So
I mean, so then there's the other thing is that in the real world, we might imagine if there's an evil person out there who's not really doing evil things, like, they probably don't deserve to die. But like in this world, if you were evil in a pretty like passive way, you're going to die if you try to read this.
You're going to disappear in blinding flash of light, and all of your possessions will be left behind.
The last thing is just that, I could picture a particular, if this artifact was obtained by a nation, that maybe that nation's leader or maybe a demigod, as a means of protection, could lock the entrance to their throne room or personal domain and have the key be reading aloud some section of this book. Which obviously then would bar evil creatures from ever getting in, because any evil creature that tries to read the book out loud is going to become incinerated. So
That's fun. That's a fun little take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the judicial system is the one that's really potentially world changing in terms of like if you can imagine a whole culture built around that idea of it's okay to commit small crimes or
Right.
do things like that. It's just once you cross whatever invisible line that people don't know is there.
Which is the best part, that nobody knows.
Right. Obviously, that's the best way for any kind of justice system to
Oh
exist.
boy. Just as you're saying that, it's a like a round city, right? Because this book is the focal point in the middle of this
Right.
city.
Yeah.
And it's just a spiral of a line that goes out from this thing as people read, go and read and go, or I guess attempt to read.
I think in my mind it's the sort of thing where like you lodge complaints against fellow citizens, and then once they
Oh
get a certain
God,
number of
Benjamin.
complaints, then they have to go read from the book. Like that guy stole
Oh,
my
you mean like the
thing,
book
or
1984? Oh, interesting. Thought crime.
that
Right. Right.
it's neither a thought crime nor is it
We
much like
will meet in a
1984,
place
but
where there is no darkness, and it's called the book room. And we're going to read from the book and see whether or not you planting your hedge on my side of the property is worth you turning into a ball of light. We're going to find out.
why don't we talk about the Book of Vile Darkness?
Okay. The Book of Vile Darkness has a property that when a non-evil creature attunes to it, that creature must succeed a DC 17 charisma saving throw or become neutral evil. This is trickier to utilize since attuning to the book is a lot more to push a creature to do than to attune to something else. But, nevertheless.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a short rest to attune to something, so it's the difference between like walking up and looking at it with the intention to read it and spending an hour with it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The only two real interesting things I could imagine kind of being used institutionally here is that first is that you could be a villain, and who's looking to recruit minions, but wants them to be able to command, as you might remember from earlier in this episode, the book lets you command evil creatures, and the book turns you into an evil creature when you attune to it. So a villain might want everybody who joins his
pretty
organization
interesting
to like swear on the book, like attune to it for an hour, and then he like takes it away so you don't stay attuned to it, but doing all that just to make sure that he can target you in the future with this. It's also a good way to root out anybody who might be good or neutral who's just trying to join your organization for the purposes of undermining or overthrowing you.
Well, a lot like you were talking about this being, or the previous book being the passkey to what have you, to protect something. This is the door code. This is the book is right there, and to get into the compound or whatever, the lair, you have to read this book to pass.
Yeah, then become evil, become corrupted, so that
you're already corrupted, but if anyone's trying to infiltrate your base and everyone has to read from this thing, then the do-gooders...
That's what I mean. They're corrupted by even making it to you. They're corrupted.
It's a double guarantee.
Yeah.
I like that. Hey there, folks. Come on down to Half Gold Books, where we sell our books for half the gold. We only got 2 books in stock this week, the Book of Exalted Deeds and the Book of Vile Darkness. Both of these wondrous artifacts are half off, and there are only 2 each in the whole multiverse. So come on down and come get them while we got them. If you act now, we can reserve a copy of the Book of Neutrality, which the makers of them other 2 books I was talking about. With this one, we'll have plenty of copies go around, so don't even sweat it. And if you read it, you're just right down the middle, and you feel real good about it. You feel calm, at peace, and you won't have to worry about nothing because it's balanced. It's neither side. It's Half Gold Books, found in downtown Booktown. Come on, get them while we got them.
And then the second kind of organizational or institutional use of this is that I can picture a guild of assassins or any organization where it would be they would benefit from really hardened recruits to have people attuning to this as a way of purging moral influences from new initiates. So, like, if you run a mercenary assassins guild, you don't want people coming in and getting cold feet about what you're going to ask them to do. And so, having them attuned to this book might, convert them to evil and then make them more willing to kind of just do whatever was necessary to complete the kind of nefarious missions you might be assigning to them.
Instead of sinking your cost into somebody who defects and then...
Or just can't stomach it, Like,
Yeah.
I imagine there's lots of
A lot of
people
time wasters out there.
Exactly. They stay for the kind of recruitment and the training and then ditch as soon as the job starts. Like they're
Batman.
just like they're just coming for the free bagels through training, and then as soon as training's over and they've actually got to go first day on the job, they're out.
They've got locks in there? They've got locks? Huh. Yeah, I could be an assassin. LOX locks, the smoked salmon for bagels.
Okay, I was trying to figure out if anyone was going to be able to follow your brain, but that makes more sense.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah. So now we get to the big, stinking, dirty heart of the existence of these two books, and that is morality in Dungeons and Dragons.
So the biggest implications of using these artifacts in your game is that they implicitly confirm, as the alignment system and other components of the game do, that there's an objective morality in the cosmos of Dungeons and Dragons.
And as dumb as that is on its face, before we get into that, I do just want to reiterate how fucked up it is that the Book of Vile Darkness, in the introductory, it says that reading it makes you go crazy, makes you go insane, and that attuning to it gives you a physical deformity. There's very little. Let me take a second run at that.
Sure.
This is so obviously awful to associate mental illness and physical deformities or physical appearance in general with being evil. I know they had several like very... No, I don't want to back up from that.
I mean, this one's a tough one to run at. Like,
it's discouraging to see this from the D&D team, and I hope that in the future they reconsider how harmful and hurtful these sort of connections are.
These tropes are outdated. They were, I feel like they were maybe grandfathered in from previous editions, that, even the current 5e book is 10 years old, 8 years old. How old is it?
I don't know, but that would be about the right
in whatever case range. I think that in the last even 5 years, a lot of these tropes have been called out more vocally and more obviously as being bad. So, I mean, we could say it's of its time, but that's still no excuse. It's not even that.
Because people were looking at H.P. Lovecraft and saying like that's kind of weird how much evil and insanity, and that's like there's a problem with using mental illness in that way. So I don't think they have a lot of cover for even writing this 8 or 10 years. It's
falling back on tired tropes that evil is ugly and crazy and bad, and that's been the tropes, and they need to be changed.
Anyway, let's move on with that important note having been made.
Well, one way the idea of objective morality manifests is that each book requires you to take at least one action corresponding to its alignment once per 10 days, and you automatically lose all benefits, whatever benefits there are, if you take an action of the opposing alignment.
Yeah, so this is pretty goofy on the scale of like 1 to 10 of how goofy these things get. It's a 1, but on the scale of like for any kind of normal thing, this is like pretty close to a 10. So for good, it specifies that the action should be one of kindness or generosity. But even when I read that, I thought, how would this ever stop from devolving at a table into a constant fight about what counts as an act of kindness or generosity? If I open
Every time.
if I keep open the door for somebody after I walk in, is that kind? If I give a single copper piece to a beggar, is that generous? What do these things mean?
And then the counter argument is you only gave a copper piece.
Right. And
you only held the door open for one person. Like, how much is enough? What is the quantifying factor here?
And these are the kind of things that I don't think anybody wants to play a role-playing game to debate or argue about. But
I mean,
that's
some people
exactly
do.
but that's exactly what these books are gonna provoke.
Are eliciting, yeah.
Yeah. But however, on the flip side of that, if we're gonna look at how that might be interesting in the game, is that once you have these books, you could test what the parameters of the objective moral system that exists in the universe are by figuring out which things kick you off of the book.
Right.
So like,
you could have moral scientists who just have a whole science of good and evil based on
so I do like
works.
So I do like the idea of there being a monastic order of monks somewhere in the multiverse who have both books and are keeping them both, and they're just like every day they're running tests to see what's going to get them kicked off. Like, if I spit on a kid, is that evil enough to get me cooked off the Book of Exalted Deeds? If I
bring in the child,
if I share my meal scraps with a dog, is that kind enough to get me kicked off the Book of Vile Darkness?
Oh my God. The evil ones are like, okay, we're only going to cut off the ear. Okay, that didn't do it. Okay, we're going to dig into this. We're going to cut off a couple toes.
Well,
Still not evil enough.
Probably, unless it's very early in the development of this monastic order, they're going to have a lot of that stuff sorted out, and it's more going to be very mundane. Like, what's the rating on pranking someone? Is that evil? If they laugh at it, though, is it generous that you made them laugh?
So then this is a whole encounter with a party where they come to this what's it called, monastery on prank week, and it's just they've dedicated the whole week to pranks, and it's all of these really surly or happy monks running around like putting tacks under each other's sandals or whatever. Oh, I kind of like that idea as an encounter.
Yeah.
Each book has a destruction clause, which says that they can only be destroyed if all good or evil in the multiverse is wiped out. That's insane.
Yeah, so it's not clear if this means all creatures of those alignments, the ability for creatures to take actions of that alignment, or if it's something even more esoteric. Like, I don't know what it means for all good to be wiped out in the multiverse or all evil to be wiped out in the universe.
It doesn't mean anything. That
make any sense.
It has no meaning.
Yeah, so it's like, it brings to mind, one of the classic ways people criticize the alignment system in D&D is it good to kill orcs? If orcs are evil, and I mean, this obviously is kind of where the D&D has this intersection of a bunch of problematic issues. But if all orcs are evil and there's a baby orc, is it good to kill that orc, or is it bad? And these books seem to suggest that if there's any evil in the multiverse, that's a bad thing, and so it all should be wiped out. But that's going to compel you to do some pretty atrocious things. And how would you be considered good after doing that? In which case, then I guess I don't know.
I mean, there are whole character arcs about this, about the paladin trying to figure out what's good, what's evil, and it's not just black and white like this. There needs to be a book of gray that's just makes you
that's
as
true. There is no neutral version of these
no
books, and that would
neutral.
be interesting.
Well, if all of this sounds like a child's understanding of good and evil, then you're right on the money, because it kind of is.
Yeah. So the only other place then that you can really take this is, given that these books exist, given that good and evil are somehow real things in the D&D multiverse, what does that tell us about the state of reality? Since we know gods are for sure real, that leaves us with a few options. One, the multiverse generated with a moral order, but was not designed with intent. So it's just random moral laws that nobody decided, they just manifested that way. They're as arbitrary as the laws of physics, basically. This is the weirdest possibility because it means that what counts as good and evil are fundamentally arbitrary. But also, given how ridiculous the whole concept of evil and good being things that exist in the world are, maybe that kind of gels with that. One kind of fun mental image around this, at least, is that it essentially means that there are good particles and evil particles, which we talked about in Detect Evil and Good.
Right.
But they must be generated by actions and then glob onto the creatures performing the actions, because clearly it's actions that, I mean, the books talk about taking actions that are good or evil. So it does
and
seem
charting
to be
them every 10 days.
Yeah,
on
so
your little calendar, you get a star or you get a little X.
Yeah. So it does seem to be that, like, it's the actions that you perform that are good or evil, and then the kind of karma, I guess, of whatever your actions you're taking is sticking to you. And you're either got some residual good on you or some residual evil on you after those actions.
I kind of want that to be a mechanic.
I mean, it's like a funny,
like fun. It sounds like fun, and it also makes things so much easier for all this stuff, because you can have an item to actually see the stuff stuck to you. You can actually like
a hose that washes it all off too.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
The magic good hoop, and you just put it over someone like it's a hula hoop, and you put it over someone and scans them.
Option number 2 is that the gods or their predecessors designed a moral order and inscribed it onto the multiverse. So, like, after the multiverse came into existence, however that happened, the gods or someone like them made a moral system and imprinted it somehow onto the universe. This is a more interesting way of thinking about things, because it's essentially history is written by the victors writ large. The gods get to kind of retroactively define the things they do as good and the things their enemies do as evil. So what I like about this possibility is that most of my campaigns end in the player characters fighting and killing gods. And
that's a classic D&D trope for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even like 20 years ago when I was running a game for my friends, they told me it's not a Benjamin campaign unless we kill the gods at the end. So it's like that's just a staple of the
it's who you
stories
are.
I like to tell.
Your base personality is God killer.
I don't think of myself as very anti-authority, but I guess I must be at heart. But so that's where you get, or that's, I think, an interesting avenue for adventure to explore. Then, in a game where in a understanding of D&D that the gods have decided what is good and what is evil, and they get to just decide and then label you as that for everyone else to see, or be interpreted by these magic items. you might get you might have a party who decides, well, that's not right. Nobody should be like, unless the gods in D&D are not themselves infallible. Like in the real world, people will say things like, that their god is the ultimate god, and so their judgment
Is true
is
and absolute.
is
Yeah.
true and absolute. But the gods in D&D are much smaller things. Like they're not one true gods. There's lots of them, and they don't all agree with each other, and they have different ideas. And
Not even
so,
Palor, the All-Father.
right.
Not even that guy.
So this does set up the fun possibility of players wanting to overthrow the gods to kind of unshackle themselves and the multiverse from the moral system they've created.
I feel like these books are more just like MacGuffins than they are. They should be treated more as just the thing to get or the thing to protect, or instead of an actual functional item. And leave what that function is up to a DM rather than codifying it with a couple of pages in the
That's not,
DM's guide.
Dungeons & Dragons doesn't really ever do what you're describing, but I agree that, like, I don't understand, like, it's an underwhelming magic item. There's no reason anybody would really want this thing, but it clearly is supposed to play some very important kind of cosmic role in explaining what the universe is like.
I mean, sending a party to create a book of gray to balance these things out, that could be fun. Or sending them out to destroy both of these books that are bad at being what they are. That could be fun. So beyond just some plot hooks, I get why I've never heard of these, is I guess what I'm going for.
Yeah. So I do have one final idea. The third idea that I have about how to use these in your game and make it more interesting is that there is a moral order within the universe that was designed with intent, but it includes the gods as subjects rather than designers. So there's something outside of the gods that has inscribed even the gods within this moral system. I particularly like this because I'm very into kind of weird fantasy adjacent type of stuff. And I like the idea that there would be this anachronistic corporate HR bureaucracy style organization where they've given every possible action a good rating or an evil rating. And so, like, you're just building up chits on the good or evil side every time you do something, and the system is all tracking it. And there's probably agents that get dispatched to do stuff like ensure that you're reading as evil when some glitch in the system made you show up as good. But mostly they're off in whatever plane that they're operating the system from.
Benjamin, are you saying you want to create a metaphysical, ubiquitous bureaucracy so big that the multiverse itself is contained within it?
Yes, basically.
I mean, that tracks.
To me, the fact
that's a Benjamin Huffman thing. Yeah.
It's alien. It works in absolutes. I mean, this moral system to me doesn't make any sense unless it's from some bizarre thing.
Hell, make it an experiment. Make it the aliens looking at us, and they made these items to see what would happen when faced with these absolutes.
And then if you wanted to do this, first of all, I think it'd be hard to build up. Like, I don't know what you'd use as the kind of breadcrumbs to get people to discover this. That would be, I'm not sure, but I do like this because, if the gods are in charge of morality and you don't like morality, well, then we go kill the gods. But in this case, the gods are also kind of trapped,
contracted. Yeah.
And so I like this because the gods maybe have the power to go deal with this, but like they're too closely observed. And so maybe the gods recruit the player characters into overthrowing this bureaucracy so that because maybe a good god and an evil god fall in love, but they can't live together because the evil god's trapped on some plane of evil, and the good god
Classic.
can't leave the plane of good. They want to live together, and so they want you to go overthrow this system so that people are no longer like their afterlives and the places they can live are no longer determined by whether they show up as good or evil.
There's some gods who refuse to believe it. They're like, we are the biggest things. Their egos are big enough where they're just like, no. This. We are all there is.
I did not have star-crossed lover gods in the notes for this. That sort of was an inspirational thing right there. But I do think that's probably the best impetus for the gods contacting mortals, is being like, look, we really love each other, but
we're
like
really into each other. Please,
this won't work unless you overthrow the entire
our babysitters won't let us kiss.
This oppressive system of morality that these guys have created.
Have you ever made out in space? It's great, and we can't do it because these jerks keep looking at us, and I don't want to kiss somebody while somebody's looking.
Worse than that, I don't know if gods can even leave the planes they're from. I mean, well, it probably depends on which gods we're talking about, but
wow.
Thanks. That about wraps up my thoughts on the Book of Exalted Deeds and the Book of Vile Darkness. If you've made it this far into the podcast, you must be a fan, and you may not know because we don't talk about it very often. We have a Patreon. So
we do have a Patreon.
If you're interested in hearing about our games and getting some spells written by me each month, you should go to patreon.com/dispelmagic and check us out.
Please do that. And if you have any further thoughts on today's topic in terms of good, evil, and what they mean in books, then tweet at us or send us an email at dispelmagicpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you again after your next long rest.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Dispel Magic. If this has inspired any ideas for your game, or you have another take on today's topic, please let us know on Twitter at DispelMagicPod. You can find Benjamin at Sterling Vermin and Dane at Dane in Danger. Thank you to Slim Mittens for our cover art, produced by Benjamin Huffman, produced and edited by Dane Fox-McGraw.
You can say something. Like, wow. That's going to be the end thing, isn't it? Is we say, you could say something like, wow.
Hey, wow. Hey, that's great. Hey, Benjamin, great thought about physics, man. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it completely devolved from Owen Wilson to just like...
I wasn't even trying to do Owen Wilson in the first place. It just...
Oh, it came off that way. I'm stopping.